Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Butcher's Fresh Cuts. I'm your host, The Butcher, and as always, we are a proud part of the Miller Park Minute podcast and streaming network. Big shout out to my boy Eric over at the MPM. You know he's bringing it every day, day in and day out, to give you the best and freshest and most relevant topics surrounding the crew. And there's nobody out there doing it quite like Eric. Love my guy out there. Big props to you, my man. The Miller Park Minute, as you know, is the world's only daily Brewers podcast. And we come at you every day at 5:30 a.m. Central Time as we broadcast out of eastern and southeastern Wisconsin. So we always give you that Wisconsin time because we're local fans here. And we can be found anywhere that podcasts can be found: YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, many more. Wherever you want to find us, you can support us at Patreon. You can see the little ticker down there. Support us. We'd love if you could. Also, we love the banter that we get with you guys. Please comment, please subscribe, please review, do all that stuff wherever you find us. We love the banter. We love to reply. We try to be really prompt about replies. We like to take questions. We like to do all that stuff. So please talk to us. We love nothing more than talking baseball, and that's exactly why we do this here. And that's why Eric does it every day. Here on the BFC, Butcher's Fresh Cuts, in the butcher shop where we are right now, where I've taken you. What we like to do is take a topic that's relevant to the Brewers right now and cut off a nice slab and take it apart piece by piece to give you only the finest USDA quality baseball discussion without any fat or unnecessary speculations. Recently on the show, we dove into the World Baseball Classic, and we'll do that more as it progresses. It's been a lot of fun. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's been a lot of fun. Team USA up 2-1 right now in the overall standings. We've talked about team ownership. We had a big riff on Mark Adenasio. I know that caught a lot of flames. Roster configuration and much more here on the BFC. And today's no different. Today, I would like to dive in real deep on a few of the crew's finest pitchers, the finest pitchers on our staff, and especially their pitch selection and the pitches they throw. I want to talk about how they throw them and how their repertoires have proven to be so effective over time and what's truly made these guys superstars for our local nine here. Today we're going to highlight three pitchers on our staff, the three best pitchers on our staff, I'd like to say. And to do that, we're going to use some stats and numbers that get thrown around a lot, as well as pitches. So quickly, I want to go over some term definitions before we dive into things so that we are all on the same page and we can fully understand the masterful work these three guys put out for us every season. So first, I want to go over some of the pitches and how they're thrown and trajectory. We hear these pitch names all the time, and I'm sure most of us know what each of these pitches is and what they mean, but it's not often that they are defined. I mean, sometimes you'll catch a little bit on a broadcast. So before we talk about the pitchers and the guys throwing them, I would like to define those pitches, at least a couple of them. The cutter, we'll start with the cutter. This is the bread and butter of our Cy Young ace, Corbin Burnes. A cutter is an off-speed pitch that breaks to the pitcher's glove side. So in Burnes' case, that would be his left side where he holds the glove, or the right side if you're the batter facing the mound. That's the way it breaks. It would break towards you if you're lefty, away from you if you're a righty. The cutter is thrown with more velocity than a slider, yes, yet it breaks in a similar way to a slider with the same 2/8 or 10-4 shake. Next, let's talk about that slider. A slider is a breaking pitch and it tails laterally down through the zone, much like a curveball, but a slider is thrown much harder than a curveball, and the break is much shorter than that of a curve. So a curve would be a much more winding sweep. Slider, much less, much quicker pitch coming at you. The release on the slider is somewhere between that of a curveball and a fastball. So a lot of what pitchers try to do is they want to keep that same release point between a lot of these pitches, so that when you see the ball release, you don't know whether it's a curveball or a fastball coming out or a slider coming out of the hand of the pitcher. The sinker is a sinking fastball, hence the name sinker, and it takes a sharp downward trajectory to the plate. It's typically the fastest pitch thrown in today's pitchers' arsenals, and it's a pitch also known for inducing a lot of ground balls. So you'll hear a lot of that in today's game. And the changeup. The changeup is essentially the definition of what an off-speed pitch would be. Every pitcher basically has a changeup, just like they all have a sort of a fastball. And a changeup is a pitch thrown well below the velocity of a pitcher's fastest pitch or their fastball, and it's used in an effort to throw off the hitter's timing. Though many pitchers thrive on their off-speed pitches, like the changeup. And one of those pitchers we'll be talking about later in this video. I think you know who that is. The last definition I'd like to go over is not a pitch, but it is whiff rate. And the reason being is that is a measurement that is used to describe a pitcher's swing and miss stuff. And we need to get a good look at the pitches that our guys are throwing. So whiff rate is figured when you divide a number of pitches swung and missed at by the total number of swings in a given sample. So if a pitcher throws 100 pitches and 26 are swung on and missed, the whiff rate of that sample is 26%. Pretty simple math, but it gets a little crazier when you get to throwing 1,000 pitches in the season of a certain type. So got it? I knew you would. Let's move on then. The first pitcher I would like to dive in on and his pitch mix is none other than our ace of aces, the Cy Young winner himself, the guy sitting behind me right over there, Corbin Burnes. Burnesy relies on a 6-pitch mix, which is one of the factors that makes him such a deceptive pitcher and a true master of his craft. His most used pitch is the cutter, which is his nastiest weapon, and he throws it 55.4% of the time. His next most used pitch would be the curveball, which he throws 18.4% of the time, and he also throws a changeup just under 10% of the time, and he throws a slider 9.2% of the time. And just for good measure, he throws in a sinker at 6.7% of the time. And every so often, on a rare occasion, he'll still see Corbin Burnes throw a 4-seam fastball, but he only did that in 16 instances. He went for 16 14-seam fastballs in 2022. At the beginning of his big league career, he threw that 4-seamer just under 60% of the time. So when he broke out in the big leagues, when he was having those little rough times before the LASIK, before the retooling, he was throwing the 4-seamer more than anything. So just about around 60% of the time. So in just a few short years, he has all but completely abandoned the pitch and changed his repertoire in a big way. Now, the slider also used to be his secondary pitch that he would use behind the 4-seamer, but now he just throws that just under 10% of the time. So let's get in. Let's talk about that bread and butter pitch that he uses, the cutter, the one that he relies on mostly. And Butcher, I love the name of the cutter. Absolutely anything that goes with chopping. The cutter is his fastball essentially, and it averages just above 95 miles per hour. He throws it down and off the plate to righties while he throws it to the inner third of the zone near the belt on lefties, like a guy like me. And much like the greatest cutter thrower of all time, Mariano Rivera, threw the cutter in a very similar way. So you can kind of see that Corbin Burnes is taking his tips from the greats of throwing that pitch. It is the only pitch in all of baseball, Corbin Burnes cutter that is, to rank in the top 10 by run value every single year over the last 3 seasons. So it is absolutely one of the most valuable pitches being thrown in all of the big leagues and has been for some time. When he picked up the cutter in 2019, he went from an 8.82 ERA in 2019, when he threw it just 0.9% of the time, to an ERA of 2.11 the following season when he threw it 31.5% of the time. So that's when you can really see the cutter usage increase, and you can see the success also start to follow. The Corbin Burnes cutter is one of the best, if not the best pitch in all of baseball, and he throws it at a 27.8 strikeout rate. Massive, huge strikeout rate on the pitch. Next, let's move on and let's talk about the curveball. The Corbin Burnes throws, like we said, 6 pitches to go over here. Like we said earlier, his curve is a secondary pitch being thrown at 18.4% of the time in 2022. It generates high swing and miss rates compared to the other starters in baseball who throw it, and he throws it hard, averaging 81.2 miles per hour on the pitch, and league average curveballs sit around 77. So he's throwing it much harder than the average curveball. And he clocked 58 Ks on the pitch in 2022 with a massive 47.7 whip rate on the pitch. And he gets also a ton of fly balls on the pitch. So let's just talk about that real quick. 47.7 whip rate. So just about half the time when he's throwing that pitch, guys are swinging and missing on it. So just an absolute great secondary pitch for Burnes to have, going from that fast pumping cutter and then throwing a big sweeping curveball and whiffing guys like crazy on it. Next, let's talk about the changeup. It's one pitch of his for the changeup. It's hard to even call it a changeup. He throws it extremely hard for a pitch to be called a changeup. He throws it at an average of 90.7 miles per hour. Some dudes have fastballs that top off at that speed. I mean, hell, in the 80s, that was like average fastball velocity was in the low 90s, and he's throwing his changeup at that speed. Pretty nasty. Average changeup speeds for pitchers in 2022 was 83.9 miles per hour, so over 6 miles per hour higher than the average changeup rate being thrown. So it's absolutely crazy. He throws it with some arm side fade, and it has some natural sink to it as well, and it generates fantastic swing and miss rates. This one's also near the 50%, 46.7 whiff rate on his changeup. So we're talking 3 pitches with super high whiff rates, super effective. He's just killing it in every aspect. His slider is also thrown relatively hard for a slider, and it has short glove side cut to it, as well as 2-plane movement. So it kind of has the visual to the hitter that's moving left to right or right to left. The pitch also generates a lot of fly balls, which is a plus in today's climate with the shift ban being in effect this year. Fly balls are going to become more valuable as a result. Lastly, the 5th of his pitches, because we're not really going to bother on his 4-seamer because he throws it so rarely. So the last one we're going to talk about for Burnesy is the sinker. His sinker generates some nice whip on it on its own, and it's his fastest pitch that he throws. He throws it at an average of 96.3 miles per hour. Like I mentioned earlier, these sinking fastballs are the bee's knees. They're piping hot fast, the fastest pitch being thrown out there today. He throws the pitch hard, and it is less arm side run than a typical sinker, but also still a very effective pitch for him. The pitch mix is something that Burnes has been adjusting a lot over the course of his big league career. Like I said, he used to throw that 4-seam often, and he relied on it as his main pitch. But with the perfection of the cutter and using his curveball more effectively, the pitch mixes and his ability to throw those pitches has turned Burnesy into one of the best pitchers in all the National League, if not all of baseball. And no hitter is looking forward to stepping into the box against him this season. Everyone's projecting him to be at another Cy Young caliber pace. He led the National League in strikeouts last year. And just imagine trying to be a batter, trying to guess which one of these 6 pitches he's going to be piping down at you. They're so different. They're so varying. They're all so good. He throws them all so well. Corbin Burnes, fantastic pitch mix. So, next pitcher. Next, I'd like to go over the 5-pitch mix of the great and powerful Brandon Woodruff. Those 5 pitches are his 4-seam fastball, which he throws the most at 38.4% of the time. He also throws sliding. What did I write there? He throws the 4-seam, a sinking fastball, and a changeup, a curveball, and a slider. Sorry, there's a little error there. Woody began his career throwing just 3 pitches. He didn't always throw 5. He would throw the 4-seam fastball, the slider, and the changeup. At this time, he was throwing his 4-seam fastball over 60% of the time, just hurling fastballs at guys nonstop. I mean, that's the kind of pitcher he was. He still kind of is, but he's kind of added to that repertoire a bit and become more of a versatile pitcher on the mound. In 2018, he adopted the sinker and the curveball, and with that, he was building that repertoire. And with the sinker working out so well, he went from throwing it just 8.6% of the time in 2018 to over 20% of the time in 2022. His curveball usage also went up from just 1.9% of the time to over 10% of the time last season. So you can see him as evolving as a pitcher as you look at this pitch mix over time and becoming more effective over time. He had a 10.86 strikeout rate per 9 in 2022. It was 10th best among all qualified starters with 90 innings minimum thrown. So his effectiveness is not something that can be questioned to this day. So let's start by diving in on his 4-seamer. His 4-seam fastball was in the 85th percentile for velocity last year, right at the top of the league, and it was in the 73rd percentile for spin rate. Also absolutely fantastic. Woody's just dealing out there with this pitch. Hitters batted just 184 against the pitch in 2022, and they whipped a whopping 28.5% of the time on the pitch. Another just fantastic numbers, which was 5th best in all of Major League Baseball. 28.5% of the time, 5th best in all of baseball, with a minimum of 150 plate appearances, and he struck out 98 batters on that pitch last season. His changeup would be his 3rd most used pitch in his arsenal, which he throws 16.3% of the time, and it is by far one of his most effective. I mean, behind his 4-seamer, this one might be the most effective, though he doesn't use it quite as much. It's a changeup that has slight arm side fade, which resulted in a massive 54% whiff rate. We're talking whiff rate all day here. This is the one with the most. It is a 54% whiff rate on the pitch. More than half of the time he throws this changeup, guys are whiffing. Awesome. He primarily throws it to left-handed batters. It's kind of a secret weapon to lefties, and to 341 to 72, so a big lopsided towards lefties. And he nabbed 39 Ks on the pitch, and batters hit just 207 against it. So just a dominating weapon that he has that he throws out from time to time. Woody's sinker is thrown very fast. He averages 95.8 miles per hour on the pitch, but it has little true sinking movement to it, and honestly, this one needs a little work. Batters tend to get to him on this pitch, at least they did in 2022. They batted 269 against it and had just a 15% whiff rate on it, so very low. And they're finding ways to hit the ball. It's not doing enough. It's not moving enough. So I suspect that Woody is working on this one as we speak right now in Maryvale, down in spring training, as the sinker has become a predominant heater pitch for most starting pitchers, and at least maybe he'll use it less in 2023, and we'll see, maybe more of that changeup. His curveball is thrown quite hard as well at 84 miles per hour. He goes for that kind of 12-6 straight drop curveball approach, much like that of Clayton Kershaw, so a good guy to be emulating, but with less dip. He doesn't quite get the dip that Kershaw does. It does feature 46 inches of drop, an inch and a half less than league average. He doesn't use it much for putaways. He only struck out 13 batters on the pitch last season, but however, he only gave up 12 hits on the pitch last season. And he threw it 319 times. So he doesn't throw the curveball a lot, but it's been very effective. Maybe we'll see a little more of that this season. And last but surely not least, Woody's slider is a fantastic pitch despite its very low usage. He threw it just 11.3% of the time in 2022. He throws it up at above league average velocity at 88 miles per hour. The league average sits around 86.1 on the slider. He has insane whiff rate on the pitch. Another one, 45.1% on the pitch, near that 50% rate. So, 4 to 5 pitches he's just been slinging. And batters hit just 218 against last season. He did not give up a single home run on his slider last season, despite throwing it 286 times. So that's really good. Didn't give up a single dinger on the pitch. That's effective as you can be. Very effective pitch to throw in there from time to time, just to keep the batters on their toes. Overall, Woody's throwing out a pretty nice 5-pitch mix, and he does mix it up pretty nicely, not relying too heavily on one pitch over the others, and that's the evolution that we've seen from his time with the Brewers when he started out just throwing 3 pitches. You've seen this evolution with basically all these guys. They throw in, they add pitches over time, they take some out, they see what's working, and it's always interesting to look at that. Overall, I think I'd like to see that sinker improve, and let's see a bit more of that slider in 2023. Bump up that usage to 15 to 18%, and let's see how many more batters we can carve up in the process. Because, Woody's the other guy you can screw around and win a Cy Young award. Next, the last hurler from the crew that I would like to dive in on their pitch mix with is our U.S. representative in the WBC this season, none other than the airbender himself, Devin Williams, the man. D-Dub relies on just 3 pitches, but that's all he needs to be one of the top bullpen pieces in all of baseball over the past 3 seasons, and soon to be the top closer in the National League. He, of course, headlines the show with his airbending changeup, which he throws 58.1% of the time. He also has a nice 4-seam fastball to throw the hitters off with, which he uses 37.7% of the time. And every now and then you'll see him spit out a cutter, just for good measure. 1 moment, please. Sorry about that. The guy was trying to get up here. He used to have a sinking fastball in his mix, but he ditched that pitch over the 2020 season, and that's the season he won National League Reliever of the Year. Despite most closers in baseball rocking a high average pitch velocity mix as their bread and butter, D-Dub operates mostly with an off-speed pitch as his dominating force. The changeup, or airbender, you know it, is the nastiest pitch in all of baseball. It features 42.7 inches of vertical drop, which is amazing for a changeup. It's nearly half a foot more than the league average, and it has 19 inches of horizontal break as well, also right at the top of the league. And the changeup rocked a 43.9% whiff rate in 2022 and a massive 36.6% strikeout rate on the pitch. So basically, if he's throwing this airbender, guys have no chance. He gave up just 23 hits on the changeup in 2022, despite throwing it 620 times, also to a measly 185 batting average against. The spin rate on the pitch It's over 2,700 rotations per minute, which is by far tops in all of baseball, and it beats out any other changeup by 200 rotations per minute and about 500 more than he gets on his fastball. So this pitch spins like crazy. That's what gives it the nasty break that it has, is the spin rate that he's able to put on it, the crazy grip that he has. It's a secret weapon of his. This pitch this is the pitch that by far batters fear more than any other in all of baseball. The last thing that any hitter wants to do at the end of a game, coming into this season, is face Devin Williams for the fear that he will throw this airbender and he might make that look foolish. But even when they are sitting on for a changeup, he might just whip one by you with his four-seam fastball. Now, his four-seamer is his secondary pitch, which is usually an odd thing to say about a closer, but not for our boy D-Dub. The pitch is a stark difference from the airbender, which is no wonder why hitters have such trouble going in between the two when you're in an at-bat. The four-seamer features just 14 inches of vertical drop, which is about average for a four-seam fastball, but compared to the nearly 50 inches of drop that he puts on the airbending changeup, it can be very disorienting for a hitter. And it also has 12.2 inches of break, which is four inches more break than the league average for a four-seam fastball. So it's also moving quite a bit more than the average fastball. Plus, he throws at 11 miles per hour faster than the changeup, hence the disorientation for hitters when they're up at the plate. So when hitters are expecting a wild, slow-moving, air-bending changeup, they are met with a 94 mile per hour heater that blows right by them, straight into the zone. The pitch accounted for a 47.3% strikeout rate last year. Just crazy. If he's not relying on the airbender, he's piping that fastball by you and guaranteed to put you out, and a 30.1% put away rate on the pitch as well. In essence, that pitch is just as effective as his changeup, if at least by way of deception. Hitters batted just .09 on it last season, with just 7 hits getting put on it last season. So absolutely effective. And despite just 7 hits on it, and he threw it 403 times last season. Devin Williams has become a force that no hitter wants to see. And he's become a star among all relievers in baseball. This season, I have no reason to believe that he won't become a top closer in baseball and to be feared as ever when he steps onto the rubber. And he will be led by his nasty, dropping, winding, sluggish, air-bending changeup. And just for good measure, he's going to pump a few fastball by you guys just for fun, just to make them look even more foolish. So in summary, we have a staff full of masterminds on this pitching staff. They have repertoires that are studied by analytics staffs all over baseball. Other teams are studying how these guys do what they do. It's a beautiful time to be a Brewers fan, as we have never had a staff like this before, like the one that we've had over the past few seasons. And it's important and it's fun to dive in and look at exactly what these legends are up to, because at this point in time, we have potential Hall of Famers doing work for us year in and year out. And it's a moment that we should really be cherishing. And I like to do that by diving into these numbers, diving into Baseball Savant and looking at these pitch mixes and seeing the whiff rates. And that's just one way that we can really dive into this point in time in our history when we have the greatest pitching staff that we've had. So from Burnes' nasty cutter to Woody's piercing four-seam fastball to D-Dub's death sentence of a changeup for any hitter facing it, we're in great hands with these dudes. So let's see Dev put up some Ks in the Classic. Let's hope he gets some time out there. Let's see these dudes get ready for another whiff-heavy season in 2023. So with that, Soup pitched great. And as always, don't widen the plate. Love you. Goodbye.
Thank you for watching the Miller Park Minute. Go Brewers!